Hey everybody, Max Boltman here alongside the Athletic Scott Wheeler and Corey Pronman and FloHockey's Chris Peters for another episode of the Athletic Hockey Show Prospect Series. A little bit of big news as we kick off the show today. We are doing a draft show. The Athletic is teaming up with FloHockey, and you can join us here on YouTube for the entire first round of the NHL Draft on Friday, June 26th at 7 p.m. Also going to be live the next day immediately following the draft to recap everything. Make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube so you don't miss it. But yeah, we'll be live through the whole first round. It's going to be great. I'm really excited for what it has in store, guys. Today, we have another big project. We are doing our annual show mock draft. Remember, we are predicting the first round here. This is what we think is going to happen next Friday, June 26th. You know, we'll see how many we get right, but I'd take 3 or 4, honestly, based on how these tend to go. This year, maybe we're shooting for 5 or 6 this year. We'll set the bar high for ourselves. And the first pick in this one, Chris Peters, with the Toronto Maple Leafs, goes to you.
Yeah, how about it, right? Nice and easy. Thanks for letting me bat lead off here, gentlemen. And, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think, based on the totality of evidence that we have at the moment, I would say that it is going to be Gavin McKenna as the number 1 pick for the Toronto Maple Leafs. There is some reporting out there that he was letting teams know that hey, I think I'm going to Toronto, or I am going to Toronto. And that seems to be the case. So what does this mean for the Maple Leafs? Obviously, I think if you're a team that has a core already, this is probably a scenario where you can bring this player in. He doesn't have to be the savior of the franchise, and that's probably the best case scenario for Gavin McKenna. I do think there are going to be growing pains. I think that there's going to be things like he'll probably be in the lineup right away next year, but I think you're going to have to be patient. But incredible skill, the most dynamic player in this class, and just really that offensive aptitude that he has is big. I also think if you're the Maple Leafs, it's really hard for you to pass on this player given the risk that exists elsewhere. Take the player with the most offensive upside.
I think that this argument I hear a lot is this is the common guy. This is the guy you have to take, whatever. I think they just love the player. I think they're just big believers in the player. Like, that's been the understanding I've gotten, is I think they buy the arguments we've made all year about whether you can go for or against. I think they just think this is the 100-point potential guy, and I'm not saying they're going to take him, but that's been my understanding.
Yeah. All right. Well, then with the second pick, Corey, for San Jose, that's you.
I think if McKenna goes 1, I think it's between Ivar Stenberg and Chase Reid here at 2. I don't know which way they go. My gut is Reid. I think they go for the defenseman here, the guy who could run the power play. I think we also like Sam Dickinson. Sam Dickinson, didn't have an amazing year this year. I don't think you can look at Sam Dickinson and be like, he's our number 1, number 2 of the future, no doubt. Like, there's a lot of work to do still here on this blue line. I think if it's close, and I do think it's close, I think they go with the D-man here. They get a little bigger. They get a pillar on the blue line, and I think they leave the draft very happy with him.
All right. So top of the draft, we've got number 1, Gavin McKenna to Toronto. Number 2, Chase Reid to San Jose. Number 3 for Vancouver. That's my slot here. And following Drance's reporting here, it's been really striking how much Caleb Malhotra buzz there is. And that precedes the hiring of his father as the head coach. If anything, you read some of the way Drance has written it, it almost sounds like that wanting to pick Malhotra might have been an obstacle to hiring Manny Malhotra, if anything else, in that order. But I do think, where Vancouver is in their rebuild, he makes a lot of sense for him. Ivar Stenberg is a fantastic player, but I think when you're picking in the top 3 and you're this early on in the process, the value of a two-way center who's on the trajectory, I think that's the biggest part with Malhotra, is the trajectory that he's on of improvement. And you can really see if this keeps going in that direction, he's a really valuable player. Number 4, that's Scott. And that is the Chicago Blackhawks.
If the draft plays out this way, and I had a sneaking suspicion that this was the way that it was going to go, 1 through 3 here, I think, and they won't be at the draft. Kyle Davidson and his team won't be at the draft because it's a decentralized format, but this is a dance to the draft stage sort of event here for the Blackhawks. I think Stenberg is exactly what they need, exactly what they would be looking for. We've talked about it. I've said it again and again. They need someone who can elevate Connor Bedard rather than him having to elevate everybody else. Stenberg is the player in this class, assuming that Gavin McKenna goes 1, obviously. Stenberg is that sort of winger. He's that caliber of a player. I think he's going to be a point-per-game player in the league. I think he's a winning player at that at that sort of level, and he is exactly sort of what they need. So I'll take Ivar here, and I'd be pretty surprised if Stenberg's here if he's not their selection.
It kind of feels like the chalk scenario that's emerged is McKenna, Reid, Malhotra, Stenberg in the top 4, and then there's deviation after that. What do you guys think would be the most likely team to deviate from that scenario if that were to happen? That's what my thoughts are too, San Jose, they take either Stenberg or they take a defenseman not named Reid. I feel like we've all kind of presumed Stenberg. I feel like we've all kind of presumed Reid. I've heard Verhoff there too, honestly. Like, I think there's a lot of interest there. Like, I think we've all kind of presumed Reid. I have not been able to get that firmly that that's their guy kind of things. And I think that's very similar to the conversations we had about San Jose this time last year.
Coming out of the combine, and I've just putting the finishing touches on my scout survey now as well, and just in speaking to people, the Sharks seem to be the team in the top 5 or 6 that the league is having the toughest time getting a true sort of pulse on. I think I've heard you mentioned Verhoff. I've heard they like Karls. Like, I think there's 3 or 4 names there that they're considering.
All right, number 5, we're back around to you, Chris. That's the New York Rangers.
Yeah, and I think this is a tough one because I think they would probably really hope that one of those forwards drops, in this range, especially if it's a center. I think Malhotra would definitely be, a guy that they want here. So it makes it a little more difficult. But I think, as you kind of look around and see the different things, there's a number of players that I think are in this range. Verhoff, Karls, Smits, like you're talking about the premium defensemen. In this particular instance, it's been tough to know exactly, who they would prefer in that group. I'm going to go with Karls in this case. There is some, he didn't participate in the combine. There have been some teams talking about that a little bit just because I believe, it was an upper body injury, concussion kind of situation. Teams are kind of monitoring that. So I do think that there is something that they're looking at. I don't think, in talking to some other sources that there's a huge amount of concern about that. But most complete defenseman, I think, you look at a guy like, Charlie McAvoy. I think that the Rangers, Charlie McAvoy grew up a Rangers fan, even though he's from Long Island. I think they would love a type of player like that. I do think that would be Karls in this case. I think he's the most likely to kind of fill that. So to me, that makes the most sense as the logical, premium defenseman available to them. But I could see any one of those guys in that mix and see where it goes from there.
All right, onward to top 5. Number 1 at Toronto, Gavin McKenna. Number 2 to San Jose, Chase Reid. 3 to Vancouver, Caleb Malhotra. 4 to Chicago, Ivar Stenberg. 5 to the Rangers, Carson Karls. That's your top 5. Corey, where does that leave the Calgary Flames at 6?
I think it's fair to say the most pressing, critical need for the Calgary Flames right now is a center. I think Caleb Malhotra getting all the way to 6 seems highly unlikely. But I think they're reassured by how he looked at the Men's World Championships, and they take Viggo Bjork here. They could point right to Logan Stankoven, who just won a Stanley Cup, and say, we think he can be that. And I think they are very happy to get a potential top 6 center of the future here at the 6th overall pick.
My one concern with Bjork here, and I do think Bjork, based off of how they've drafted in the past, Bjork is probably a player that scouting staff loves. Like, that would not surprise me in the least. My one wonder is with Cole Reshny and Ethan Wittenbach and Cullen Potter, and you go down the list of the forwards that they have up front, it's a very, very small group.
I agree, and if those guys were like high picks and premium guys, that'd be one thing. But like, other than Reshny, like Potter's not a substantive player. Like, like it's Wittenbach, maybe he's gonna play. Like, and now I think you look at Parekh too now in this, and it is a small group.
Even Gridden,
poor guy.
like, Gridden's not big.
Yep. No, it's all. I think your point is perfectly fair, but I think like if you look at their centers, it's just like a wasteland essentially. And I think you even look at Reshny, and it's not. I think he could play center in the NHL. Are we all sitting here guaranteeing that though? So I think. But I get what you're saying. I would wonder if Karls goes 5 if he ends up being 6, just because I feel like one, they need a really good defenseman like that, and I do think there is some pressure to take Western Canadian kids or take Canadian kids in that market. Well, I think in a lot of Canadian markets, there's that pressure right now with how hard it's been to keep their star players.
Yeah, and I will say that the post-combine buzz about Bjork has been palpable in terms of how things went, how teams feel about him. The consensus is growing that, in some cases he is the number 2 center, or the number 1 center ahead of Malhotra for some people at this point, which was not really a common opinion a few months ago. And so it's just been really remarkable to watch his rise and the respect that he's garnered over the last year.
What's interesting about that, like, if he's the number 1 center in the class, how do you compare him head to head with Stenberg? You've seen him. You guys have seen him at so many events where they've been on the same line in many cases at these events. Like, head to head, how would you compare Bjork and Stenberg?
He hasn't been far off Stenberg in terms of World Juniors, and like when we've seen, even going back to the World Junior Summer Showcase last summer, Bjork has stood toe to toe to him from a That doesn't mean the projection is the same, but from a performance side by side, they've been comparable when they've played together.
I think Stenberg is more skilled, not significantly, but I think there is more skill, more natural offense and finish. Definitely more finishing there. God bless Viggo Bjork and his 7 missed breakaways in a row.
Still won the gold.
Yes, I think Bjork is obviously, he's a center. He's more competitive, more details, more two-way there. And Stenberg's about 2 inches taller. So I think that's why the pro projection gives you a little bit more reassurance there.
All right, that takes us to number 7 in Seattle, and Seattle has a board that looks like exactly the kind of board I think Seattle should want right now. They've used so many high picks on forwards, specifically on centers. I think it's a smart way to use high picks, but at some point you got to take a high-level D. And so to me, this comes down to Albert Smits, Daxon Rudolph, and Keaton Verhoff. I'm going to go with Smits for them here in this case. The way we've talked about Smits in this pod, I think it's the kind of D that you can really build around. I also think there's an advantage toward the pro readiness here for a Seattle team that could use the D getting there a little bit sooner than maybe on the Rudolph end. So I'll say Smits for the Kraken.
I will say we haven't done the draft show the last couple of years, but I was surprised when they took Jake O'Brien last year. And if we're doing the draft show this year, which we are, my eyes will pop out of my head if the Seattle Kraken don't take a D here.
Yeah, or if they take Bjork.
Yeah, that's the thing. If Bjork falls, all of a sudden, knowing how they have picked, it's like, but
well, that's how it felt in the Berkeley Cat year. There was all those D that year, and they took Cat, and you're like, I don't know that they really needed him, but
yeah.
All right, on to number 8 here, the Winnipeg Jets. Scott.
Well, I think now it becomes a bit I don't think any of us are surprised to see Keaton Verhoff here, but I think relative to where we were all at on him entering this season and where the consensus seemed to be with him entering this season as frankly the number for a stretch there, and not for a short stretch either, as the number 1 D prospect in this class, I think this is where that sort of road starts to end. Like, I can't imagine Verhoff getting past Winnipeg and Florida here. I do think, to Corey's point with Calgary, I think you're having the same conversation about the need to keep guys long-term. If you're the Winnipeg Jets, they've actually done a good job with Hellebuck and other, sort of locking up some others to long-term deals. But Verhoff, they need that sort of cornerstone prospect. I don't think it matters what that looks like. I know, in sort of speaking with some people in Winnipeg, the sense in that market seems to be that they have to get a center here, but I don't think you take Tynan Lawrence over a Daxon Rudolph or a Keaton Verhoff here, and I don't think the other 2 centers get to them. And it's not as though Sal Monson and Sasha Boumedian are pillar pieces of a future blue line. I know they're very high on Sal Monson, and Sal Monson had a great year last year and is a very good player, but he's not, in terms of caliber of prospect, an equal to a Keaton Verhoff or a Daxon Rudolph, and I think Verhoff specifically makes a lot of sense if he's available here for the Jets.
All right, on to number 9, that's the Florida Panthers, Chris.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the picks that we would most likely see that could be in play here. I think any team that sees what's available, especially if it's like a Daxon Rudolph, one of the premium defensemen that's there, they would take that player. I'm actually going to go in a different direction than Daxon Rudolph in this specific instance. I think if you're Florida, you have a little bit of time and you have a little bit of room to kind of play. I think like Albert Smits would be a great a short-term kind of guy that could be there, but he's not available now. So I'm going to go a little bit off the board and a player that I think is going to continue to rise and be a topic of a conversation, I'm going to go with Wyatt Cullen at number 9 here. The buzz on Cullen has been growing a little bit. He has, in a draft that lacks a ton of premium skill, he has that. I think if you are Florida, you feel like you have a core and it's kind of nibbling around the edges here. This is a player that could potentially boost your scoring, which I think would be attractive to them. I think Rudolph is absolutely a possibility here. I think any of those defensemen would be. But Wyatt Cullen is the name that I keep hearing more and more as one that may go higher than we anticipate, because I think a lot of teams do want to make the bet on his skill and his growth and all of the things that we've seen from him in the last, few months.
I had a scout in my survey just yesterday text me like, is it crazy to think that we could have Wyatt Cullen in our 6 or 7 spot on our board? Like, I think that's the conversation that some teams are having about the player here.
It's also a little different flavor, Chris, from how Florida's been built, but maybe in a way that works, right? Maybe you need that kind of skill infusion to go with all these physical, playoff style guys.
Right. Yeah. I think that's kind of the point for me is that, it is, they need some more dynamic talent into that mix, and just the opportunities to increase scoring in the way that a lot of people believe Wyatt Cullen could potentially increase scoring. Like, a lot of people view him as hey, this there's a lot of projecting going on.
Yep.
But if he could be a top line player, he could potentially be a top line player.
How did you guys hear how his combine went, out of curiosity?
I didn't hear anything negative in particular.
I did. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I think some teams are okay. I think it's just I don't think I think he rubs some people the wrong way, but I think it's just minor details. But I do think 9, 10, 11, he's in play there. I was just, that was one I got flagged out coming out, that I think just the way he goes about his business can rub people the wrong way sometimes.
Yeah. I will say too, Daxon, typically teams in the 9-10 range aren't taking guys out for dinner at the combine, but Daxon went for dinner with 2 teams, and it was Seattle and Florida. So I think they've kind of circled that Daxon might be there for them, and I think they're at least doing their due diligence on Rudolph.
Yep. All right, let's go to 10 at Nashville. We'll take a break after this, Corey.
I think it feels like it's being laid up here for Daxon Rudolph to be the pick to Nashville. I think Malte Gustafsson is very much in play here for them, in part because that's the kind of defenseman they tend to target, the big, heavy player. I mean, I've compared him to Mattias Ekholm. Mattias Ekholm was a pick by the Nashville Predators. But I look at Tanner Molendyk, I look at Cameron Reid, they have these two-way guys in their system. They have a lot of two-way guys. They need somebody who can score a goal. There's a lack of high-end skill in this organization. So I'm going to go ahead and give him Daxon Rudolph here at the 10th pick.
You may have noticed the World Cup is here in North America, and the Athletics Podcast Network has something for everyone. You can wake up with the Totally Football Show from LA. You can dive deep into the biggest talking points of the day with the Athletic FC podcast, and watch the TIFO podcast fool around on their daily live streams in the afternoon. All of our shows are free to watch or listen to on your favorite platform. Enjoy the World Cup. All right, we're back, fellas, and we're through the top 10. Just to recap here, number 1 at Toronto, Gavin McKenna. San Jose at 2, Chase Reid. At 3 for Vancouver, Caleb Malhotra. At 4, it's Ivar Stenberg going to Chicago. 5, Carson Karls to New York. The Rangers, that is. 6, the Calgary Flames take Vigo Bjork. 7, the Seattle Kraken, Albert Smits. 8 is Keaton Verhoff to the Winnipeg Jets. 9, the Florida Panthers, Wyatt Cullen. And 10, the Nashville Predators, Daxon Rudolph. That is the top 10. And it leaves St. Louis in a really interesting spot here. They have 2 picks in the next 5 here, at number 11 and number 15. To me, this debate comes down to, do you want to take the last of kind of the big group of defensemen, depending on how you view Malte Gustafsson and Ryan Lynn, if you view them as distinct or not, or do they go with one of the forwards, whether that be the center, Tylan Lawrence, who I would say is probably the next best center available, one of the wingers. The bet here I would take, though, if I'm St. Louis, even though I think D is kind of the scarce position, I wonder, you look at the teams behind them, And New Jersey certainly does not need another young defenseman in their system. The Islanders just took Keishon Aitchison a year ago, and I would say Gustafsson probably projects to a pretty similar role as Aitchison. Even the Columbus Blue Jackets just took Jackson Smith. So I wonder if the St. Louis Blues roll the dice here. And if they want to figure one each, one forward and one D, I'm going to say they take Ethan Belches, the power winger, in the 11 spot and roll the dice and see what happens at 15.
My one hiccup with them taking a winger is just that, like, you've got Jimmy Snuggerud, you've got Justin Carbonneau. Like, they've used some assets there. They feel to me like a team that's kind of the start. They feel to me like a team that's kind of the start of the Tynan Lawrence conversation. Like, I think they need that center. Dvorsky's a good player, but
it probably depends on whether you're keeping Thomas or not. And if you're keeping Robert Thomas and you're going forward with Thomas Dvorsky as the 1-2, certainly you'd love to have Lawrence. He's a good player too. But I still think, and I've made this argument before, I know that you just mentioned a bunch of the wingers, maybe Neighbors, but does any really have the same profile as Belches? And certainly the rarity of the size skill combo, I think it makes this a valid use of the pick.
He's a unique player.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to last much longer either. So I think that's a fair roll of the dice there, especially since they've had some of their D prospects really pop, especially Adam Juracek last year. Yep. I thought was one of the best players in all the CHL last year. So I think that's I have zero issue with that one.
All right, 12 is the Devils, Scott.
Yeah, I think there's a very real chance that we have Malte Gustafsson going too low here, and yet I can't imagine the Devils with their logjam on the blue line of young blue liners taking a D here. Like, they just feel to me like they're going to be a team that takes one of the forwards. I could see them being all over Wyatt Cullen and his skill level. I could see them taking Belches if he's here. With those guys gone, my attention turns to Tynan Lawrence. He's not Nico Hischier, but there are some similarities in terms of style of player, why you like the player, the work ethic, the two-way, the sort of up and down the ice skating. So I'll take Tynan Lawrence here. Again, I think Belches and Cullen might be the better fit, and I think one of them is probably here. And I do think we maybe have Malte Gustafsson going a little low here, but I like Lawrence for them. They need a forward up front in that pool.
Can you explain the logjam? It's Hughes, Nemec, and who else?
Salayev.
I mean, that's fair, but is he going to play for sure this year?
Even like, they've got to make a decision on like Seamus Casey. Like, I think Seamus Casey is playing for multiple organizations in the league at this point. They've got to make a decision on Nemec. Maybe if you've made the decision that you're moving Simon Nemec, then you sort of recalibrate here, and a player like Gustafsson maybe becomes interesting. But Salayev's coming. Like, they've got Hughes locked up long term.
Pesci, Kovacevic.
Well, I guess I look at that and I think that Casey's like a fringe NHL prospect at this point for me, and I think Gustafsson is the same level as Nemec and Salayev. So it's I don't know. That's a lot of player to go past. Like, I think he's significantly ahead of Lawrence. I know you don't view it the same way, but for me, like that, if I was in that scanning room, I'm cringing hard if we're going past him. To give you're at the U18s. One guy was one of the 3 to 4 best players there, and the other guy was like pretty ordinary. Like, that would be tough for me.
You've been high on Lawrence throughout this process, though. Like, it's not.
He's a great player, but
I think this is his range. He's going to go in the early teens here. That sort of 10 to 15 range, I think, is right where Lawrence is going to land.
He's another guy I heard got beat up pretty good at the combine. Like, I think he goes teens, but like I don't know. Like,
he's the one guy from our top group that I feel like has the biggest potential to plummet. But I could easily see, New Jersey taking the chance here as well. Yeah, I mean, because I considered Gustafsson at 9 for Florida as well. Like, I feel like, the natural replacement long-term for Seth Jones and like other things like that. But
10 in Nashville too. I could see.
Yeah,
Malte.
I think like Malte could go anywhere in here and it wouldn't shock me. So, and I think that's the important thing with these mock draft picks is that we're talking about, fractions of differences, and a lot of teams might have fractions of differences on their list. But the Lawrence question and how he ebbs or flows here, like, really could reshape the first round, because I think that there are teams that want to like that center. And I'm just curious to see, because of the lack, like really once you get outside of 13, 14, 15, you're starting to be like, we might just have to bite the bullet here if we're not there. Maybe there's some things that we don't like to try to get that. So we'll see where that goes.
All right, Chris, this one goes to you for the Islanders. 13.
Yeah, and this one's really tough too, because like I think like looking at the, obviously they have a lot of left shot defensemen already that are pretty good. And so that makes it tough. But I think like in the situation that they're in, I think the gap between a guy like Malte Gustafsson and the rest would be too much for them. I think that, so Malte Gustafsson would be my pick here. And the thing is like, while there is a similarity in profile to what they have, I just think that Malte kind of probably gives you that guy that you can develop into a stopper. I don't think that's what Keishon Aitchison is going to be. I don't think that's what Matthew Schaefer is going to be. And so I think that, you might have one of these guys playing their offside in the top four. Gustafsson is a guy that's super versatile, super mobile. Now you suddenly have a core of defensemen that I feel is like the makings of a championship core. So I'm going with Malte there.
I like it. I mean, my gamble was that I think those teams in between the St. Louis picks, like you look at what they have, but there does come a point where it's just, and you've seen Buffalo build this way. I mean, how many left shot D does Buffalo have? And they have one of the best blue lines in the NHL now. It works. You can play them on their offside, and it's just good to have the best blue line possible.
Yeah. And like, to me, like, I do think that the gap begins really at 13 here. And I feel like the players that we're picking, there's a significant difference between them and where we're at. So it's just basically a best, like New York is in a position where it's like, we just have to take the last best guy.
Yeah. Corey, 14 to Columbus.
Oscar Hemming. They draft a big power winger out of BC with good skill level. Guy projects to be a top 6 hard to play against type. I think they're happy with him in this range. I think we talked about this next group of players. I think a lot of teams have Hemming in this second group of players. He might be the last name, but he is part of the group, and Columbus is happy to get him here at the 14th spot.
Yep. And he certainly fits with some of the big scoring forwards Columbus has had too. It seems like there's, managerial change, but it still feels like an ethos there. 15 for St. Louis. So the gambit to get the D to fall doesn't work, but you guys talked about the center with Lawrence at 11. They'll pivot to a different center here and take Oliver Suvanto. We'll see about the skating. I think that's probably the big question here, but this looks like a player who's going to be able to log important matchups for an NHL team at some point, Corey.
Yep, I agree. I think you're going to see a run of centers here. Lawrence, Command, Savanto. Like, they're going to go, I think, bang, bang, bang here in the teens.
Yep. All right. Does that run continue at 16 for Washington, Scott?
It does. The Washington Capitals are going to take Alexander Command here. They've drafted a ton of wingers. I don't think that necessarily precludes them from using one of these two picks on a player like an Adam Novotny, who I think has a chance to go in this range. But I bet you with one of those two picks, they take a center. It's the most glaring sort of area of need in their pool. And this is an organization that, or a range in the draft for the organization that makes a lot of sense. So I don't think Command lingers long. He's another player who has some definite momentum, not just coming out of U18 Worlds, but coming out of the Combine. Mm-hmm. Sounds like he impressed some people. And I think he goes in this range here, and the Capitals make a lot of sense.
Honestly, if I was to bet of those three next centers, Lawrence, Savanto, Command, I would bet Command goes first.
I do think Command goes ahead of Suvanto. At this point, for sure.
I think, he's such an interesting player and absolutely has. I think he's started to ascend into that territory of, like, I say those 13 guys. If there's a 14th, it's Command. So I guess that brings it to me, doesn't it, Max?
Yes, it does.
Los Angeles Kings.
Number 17, LA.
This is a bit of a trickier one because I think that there's a lot of different options that they have here, guys that could make a lot of sense. The one that I'm going to go with here is Maddox Dagenais. There are a wide range of opinions on this player. And the thing is like, is he a center? Is he a wing? What ultimately is he going to be? Well, he's 6'4" with skill. He has some things, you look at what what LA gave up in Liam Greentree. I think personally, I like Maddox Dagenais better. I think he's a good replacement for that player. I think he can fit on either side. Decisions can be a little bit questionable at times, but 6'4" guys with his hands and his shot, I think are really attractive, especially in the middle of the draft. So I'm going with Maddox Dagenais for LA.
Do they kind of need him to be a center? I mean, they lose Kopitar. It's a pretty thin pipeline. It feels like they need him to be a center.
You'd certainly like him to be. I mean, I think that's the thing is you're taking the chance here on a player that has center experience and saying, all right, where can we develop that player? And that's one of the reasons why I feel comfortable putting him in this position because, there's some development that needs to happen. But it does sound like he's heading back to the QMJHL last year after flirting with the idea of going to college. So we'll see exactly where he ends up and how soon.
Yeah, and it does feel like they would be very excited if one of Savanto Lawrence command gets to 17. That
100%.
Feels like a natural fit there.
100%. Yeah, agreed.
But as we all learn over the years, those centers in D, they go quick.
They go quick, real quick.
All right, Corey. Washington back on the clock at 18.
I think they take JP Herbert there, and I know it's another wing. But some of their wings haven't worked. I think Parishchak, for example, we're not really sure what he's going to become. And I think you look at Hurlburt and the goal scoring he has and the high end skill. I think that's still a guy they're excited to add to their system. Potential, middle six, top six power play type of guy here. Top scorer in the Western League this year. And they take a shot and they roll the dice on his skill.
All right, JP Hurlburt at 18 to the Capitals. At 19 for Utah, Utah is the team that has everything. I think they have young forwards, they have centers, they have D, they even have a goalie on the way in Michael Hrabal. There's not an obvious need here for them. But how about Ilya Morozov as a guy who played college hockey at a really young age, has a lot of projectable traits, feels like he could slot in to a middle six at some point and be a nice role player there for a system. I think that's where you kind of beef up there is his size in the middle of the lineup. All right. Number 20, Scott, is the San Jose Sharks.
I'm going to take Ryan Lynn here and double down on D for the San Jose Sharks. I think Lynn goes late teens. I think he goes in one of those 3 or 4 picks that we just went through here. But if he doesn't, I think the idea of adding both Chase Reid and Ryan Lynn to that back end and suddenly having Lynn, Dickinson, and Reid as sort of your pillars to build around on the back end, I think you'd be very, very excited if you're Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah. All right, so we are through 20 picks here. 1, Toronto, Gavin McKenna. 2, San Jose, Chase Reid. 3, Vancouver, Caleb Malhotra. 4, the Chicago Blackhawks, Ivar Stenberg. 5, Carson Karls to the Rangers. 6, Viggo Bjork to Calgary. 7, Albert Smits to Seattle. 8, Keaton Verhoff to Winnipeg. 9, Wyatt Cullen to Florida. 10, Daxon Rudolph to Nashville. 11, Ethan Belches to St. Louis. Tynan Lawrence goes to New Jersey at 12. Malte Gustafsson to the Islanders at 13. Columbus gets Oscar Hemming at 14. Oliver Suvanto to the Blues at 15. The Capitals take Alexander Command at 16. The Kings get Maddox Dejanay at 17. Capitals back on the clock at 18 take JP Hurlburt. The Utah Mammoth take Ilya Morozov. And the San Jose Sharks with Ryan Lynn. Let's take a quick break right there. We'll come back, finish out the first round. All right, we are back on the clock at number 21. Well, actually on the clock for the first time at number 21 is the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, I think this is a challenging place if you're Philly, in terms of what you're looking at and what's available. There's a lot of good skill players. I think that's something that they're going to be looking at is to continue to build a little bit more skill in this group. I think there are ways to do that from the blue line with Tommy Blyle. There's ways to do that at forward with a number of players. It ultimately came down to guys like Elton Hermanson and Liam Ruck in this spot, and I'm gonna go with Liam Ruck. I'm gonna go and I think he's definitely got some late pop in terms of people that are starting to be a little bit more sold on Liam, and they're certainly more sold on Liam than they are on Marcus, and we'll see if ultimately they end up in the same organization. Liam's got that compete. He's got that motor. He's got the ability to kind of do some of those things. I think that there's a really high level of hockey sense there, which is going to speak to, Danny Briere's staff. I just feel like he's a guy, why not? At that point, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of various options. I just think that Philly really needs to focus on continuing to build skill.
All right, number 22, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Corey.
Their manager, Kyle Dubas, has talked about getting bigger, getting harder to play against. I think the one guy in this draft left in the spot that really is Gleb Pugachev from Torpedo, 6'3", one of the most physical players in the draft, while also having a good talent base. I think there's some reservations of taking a Russian in the 20s, even though I think Pukachev's going in the 20s because he hasn't played in any major tournaments. Pittsburgh's a pretty video-heavy team. I think they would have watched a lot of him by now, and I think they'll feel comfortable taking him at 22.
All right, Boston at 23. I look at the Bruins system, and I think the player here that I like is Jack Hextall, but I look at their system and I see centers there, and I really don't see a whole lot of defensemen. And so I look at that and I say, do they have to kind of maybe you're dipping a little deeper into the class? I don't know if it's a true best player available, but William Hawkinson.
Scott, Chris, are any of you convinced that James Higgins is for sure a center in the NHL?
I think he's going to be at his best down the middle. Like, I think if you are going to maximize James Higgins as a player, it will be as a center. Doesn't guarantee that he's a center, but
yeah, I mean,
for those who are listening on audio, Chris shook his head.
Yeah. So I'm less convinced of it. I think I almost see him in kind of a Will Smith mode. That's kind of where I have some feeling on that, but to that point too, like obviously like Matt Poitras, I think they thought was going to be a guy that has not panned out that way. It sounds like, he could potentially be a guy that isn't around. But like, when I mocked him doing another mock draft, I did mock Hextall there, but I think Hawkinson is another guy that could go a little bit earlier than maybe he's listed on a lot of the public lists. For a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, I do think that that's a distinct possibility for Boston in that range.
The people who like Hawkinson will like him a lot to Bischel, and Bischel went right around this range. I think he's smaller than Bischel at the same age, but that's like the same idea as like why he'd go this high.
Yeah,
very Bruins kind of traits too, right? I mean, can you see a little Nikita Zadorov rhyme here?
Yeah, it's fair. Also smaller, but yes.
I think I think not just because of the London Knights connection, but I've thought a little bit, and Zadorov went 18 or 16. Him and Stanley both went like 16, 18. But I've thought a lot about Maxim Sokolovsky, who's obviously a London Knight, similar to Zadorov, Russian kid out of London. They're both very raw at that age. And I think we're very, very much, even frankly, I think a couple picks ago, we were into the Maxim Sokolovsky range as well.
Yeah, there's definitely some Sokolovsky first round buzz for sure.
Well, then go ahead and give him to Vancouver.
I'm not going to give him to Vancouver. There are a number of teams. If our draft order had worked out differently, I would have taken him to a couple of other teams here. But no, the Vancouver Canucks, I'm not going to take him. I am going to take Adam Novotny. I don't think Novotny is necessarily here. Like I get the sense in talking to a few people over the last couple of weeks, both for my surveys and for my upcoming sort of final mock, I get the sense that Novotny has a real good chance to actually go in the sort of late teens, early 20s here. But if he doesn't, and we're still in the early 20s at 24, if he doesn't, I think the Canucks, that sort of powerful, strong skating ability to score up and down the ice, going to play for you winger. I don't think anybody doubts whether Novotny's going to be a player. There's maybe some doubts a little bit about hockey sense there, but the rest of his game is very well liked, and I think this will be his range.
All right, that puts us on to number 25, Chris, the Seattle Kraken, second pick of the night.
Yeah, I think in this instance at this range, they don't worry about having already picked a defenseman in the draft. They pick another one. They go with Tommy Blyle here, and I think Blyle is, he's got a lot of great numbers, and then on top of that, he's one of the best skaters in this draft. I think that's going to be a player that they're going to look at. I do think that, based on some of the buzz that I've heard, it's similar to Scott, I was looking at Adam Novotny at each of my last two picks as a real strong possibility for either of those teams. In the end, I think that, Seattle going with Blyle here, if you do get Albert Smits as we have in this, I think you can supplement that with a true puck mover, a transporter, a guy that is, really only just scratching the surface, I feel like, of where he can go. And I think that you would have a lot of people excited to come away with 2 higher end defensemen from this class if you're Seattle.
All right. 26, Corey, the Rangers.
They're going to take Jack Hextall here, projected third line center in the NHL. I think for me, he's right with Command and Savanta and Lawrence in terms of caliber of prospect. Two-way guy, 6'0" and a half measure at the combine. Good enough skater, good offense, plays all situations. Rangers need center depth desperately. He's not the high-end guy. I think they are, that would be you'd be talking more of 5. I actually wouldn't shock me if they took Viggo Bjork at 5, presuming Malhotra is gone. Like, I think that's something they have to at least seriously talk about. But if they don't take Bjork, then I think they're definitely taking a center at this pick, be it him, be it Rogowski, be it Dagenais, if he gets into the 20s. So they go with Hextall here.
All right. And the center train will keep rolling at 27 for the Sabres. They will take Brooks Rogowski, the 6'7" center. The traits are pretty ridiculous, and you have to do a little bit of projecting here. But especially where Buffalo's forward core sits going forward, getting someone who, even if he is a bottom 6 guy, I think that can be extremely valuable for the Sabres.
I do like that he chose to go back to the OHL next season, too. I think that's recognizing where he is in his development and that he needs to, score a little bit more at that level. And there's no rush for him to go into college and be like a 4th line guy right away from Michigan State next year.
Yeah. All right. Number 28, Scott, that's the Montreal Canadiens.
The Montreal Canadiens, I think, are well positioned to take a swing here and operate from a position of strength with where their young group in the NHL is at, where their pool is at. I think they should and will be prioritizing some size moving forward. So I wonder about a Casey Mutrin or a Ryder Cali or a Seamus Ignatavicius here. But I like them to take a big cut here, and I think the biggest cut you can take here is on Elton Hermansson, the Swedish winger, the most talented player who's still available here, and I think Elton goes in the 20s at some point here, and one of the only players left in the way that our draft has played out. Elton's one of the only players left who projects to play on a power play and score and produce as the focal point of his game.
All right. Number 29, St. Louis. Chris, their 3rd pick of the first round.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously with the way things kind of went, you got Belchetz earlier, and then you've got Savanto. And, as I kind of look around, I'm like, gosh, where do you kind of go from here with some of those options? And, I'm looking at the D. I'm not seeing a ton that gets, me super excited for them. But I do think one guy that has very consistently been in the back half of a lot of first rounds in terms of, teams that I've talked to is Adam Gollier. And so I do think he is a defenseman that has the chance to be the next guy outside of the group that we've talked about, like the Hawkinsons, Blyles. Villeneuve is certainly a possibility. I'm not getting the sense he's going to go in the first round. And I just think that for them having gotten a couple of guys here, Gollier is a good, solid option for them. I think he fits the mold of the kind of style that they play. And I think he fits there.
Okay, 30, Corey, Calgary.
Calgary is going to break a lot of hearts here, and a lot of people who had some storybook ending type of scenarios, and they are taking Marcus Ruck, and they are going to snag him from the Flyers, taking him with their 2nd pick. And they add a high-end skill, high-end playmaker from out west there in Canada to their prospect pool.
The irony of this is Calgary is one of the teams that has the capital because they have those 2 picks early in the 2nd round. That if they were able to get Liam to fall to them, Calgary could get both.
Yeah, I think they're the team that everybody kind of circles as like if they wanted to do this, they could. They're the most likely to do it.
I do wonder if the word back injury has entered into the conversation here and whether teams are concerned about that with Marcus. Like, he's a kid who maybe more than any other player in this draft needs to get into the gym and spend a full summer in the gym, and he might be losing that this summer to this sort of back thing that he's dealing with. I'm sure teams will do their due diligence on the severity and that kind of a thing, but it's been these back injuries have been a constant talking point with several prospects over the last few years, and it sounds like he's dealing with at least something there. So that's my one wonder with Marcus.
Yeah. All right, 31, the Carolina Hurricanes. I actually wonder what the odds are that Carolina trades out of this pick. I feel like the fact they don't have a
90%.
second, third, or fourth. Or I think they do have a fourth, but it's not their own. Feels like that's where Carolina's going to go with this, but I don't know if that's the spirit of this.
They like 3 seconds and a fourth, and yeah.
Exactly. I'll take Mathis Preston there for Carolina. A lot of speed, a lot of skill. Feels like the kind of guy Carolina has picked in the past. And 32 to bring us home, Scott.
And at 32,
Senators.
I'm convinced that Sokolovsky goes in the first round, and so I'm not going to let him get out of the first round in our mock. He's also a player, frankly, that is kind of the type that Ottawa has selected. They've gone after the big, athletic, physical specimens
Is he not
in
like
the
an
past.
Eliasson clone, essentially?
I think he's a much better prospect than Gabriel is. Like, I just think from the pure size, strength, physical profile, mobility standpoint, having his wits about him in a way that Gabriel Eliasson I don't think has his wits about him. I think he's a better prospect.
I think he's better
I could see a
too.
Ryder
I don't know if he's like dramatically different though. Like Gabe's still 6'6", he skates well. He's mean.
Hockey sense is far better on
yes,
Maxim.
that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think Gabe ever plays a game in the NHL. Like I'm completely out on Eliasson.
That's perfectly fair. Yeah, I get it. I'm just making a argument there that I feel like you could draw a line between the two of them and say like this is a kind of we have this already, and they've signed Eliasson already, right?
They have second round pick. Even going back, like they picked Ben Roger, and like there's been a lot of that type with very mixed results, obviously, that they've gone after. I wonder about Mutrin and Ryder Cowley and those types here for them as well.
Yep.
I want to see one of those like college football recruiting graphics with like Scott's face, and it's just like all caps out on Gabe, totally out on Gabe Eliasson.
Those are the two names, Cowley and Mutrin, who I've heard that I think are going to go day one that we didn't get in here. Those are the ones that I've heard more about.
Yeah, I definitely think Mutrin was another guy that came out. Like, I mean, it's just tough. This class is so tough, and I think really predicting the bottom half of this first round, it is every single year. It is difficult to predict, and it really only takes one team to go completely different here. But this year in particular, I think the gap begins sooner in the first round. Relative to what things look like in the second round. You could probably give me 40, 50 names here, and I'd be like, yeah, sure. I mean, like, why not? Like, it's very possible that they go in there, and I mean, hey, that's the joy of this portion of the draft. And odds are, once you're picking in this latter third of the first round, you're just hoping you get a guy.
I'm just going to read off the last 12 picks here. I don't think anyone needs me to read 32 names in a row to close the show. But just from 21 on, Philly with Liam Ruck, Pittsburgh at 22 with Gleb Pugachev, 23 the Bruins, William Hawkinson, 24 the Canucks, Adam Novotny, 25 the Kraken, Tommy Blyle. At 26, it's Jack Hextall to the Rangers, 27 Brooks Rogowski to the Sabres, 28 the Canadiens take Elton Hermanson, 29 the Blues, Adam Gollier, 30 the Flames, Marcus Ruck, 31 the Hurricanes, Mathis Preston, but really they're trading out of it, and 32 the Ottawa Senators, Maxim Sokolovsky. That is our 2026 The Athletic Hockey Show mock draft. Any takeaways, guys, as I just read all that off? Anyone who you're shocked to see not go in the first round, Corey?
I think one thing that definitely stands out to me is, despite this being the draft of the defensemen, that second half of the draft, until we got to Sokolovsky right at the end, like there was a lot of forwards going in that second half. And talking to scouts, I do wonder if one or two other defensemen sneak in there. Does Jakub Vanacek, does Samuel Lowry sneak in there maybe? Does Villeneuve? I think that's one thing that I think about there. That was the first thing. I think both rucks going in the first would be interesting. I don't think it's impossible, but okay, impossible is not a word. Impossible. But it's not how I think it's probably going to go. Those are the main things that stood out to me. I think that I think the listeners are just happy we talked about some guys who aren't the top 10 guys for an episode. I feel like people are probably getting sick of us just mentioning the same 7 names over and over again. But in our defense, you listen the most when we do those names. So
Yeah.
that's how it works.
I wonder how many listens we'd get on a breaking down the last half of the first round NHL draft podcast.
People, we always get those messages like, "Why don't you do the third round stuff?" Because then we would all get fired.
Yeah.
If we kept doing those kind of articles.
But we do love you sickos out there. We love you. Thank you for keeping
the
us
real
employed.
heads. The real
And
heads.
you can read The Athletic for all of the third round analysis.
And please do. There's so much good stuff on the site.
Yeah, we have Scott and I have scouting reports on all the mid round guys kind of thing, but we just can't devote an hour to talking about them.
You can even do it one better. Why don't you scout them yourself on FloHockey? Like half of them are they're all there.
I literally wrote features on Vladimir Drevecki and Adam Valentini this year, so nobody can.
Yeah, I love listening to like NFL draft content and listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And like when they release like a best offensive line ranking, I like that's the easiest skip for me in the world type of thing. Or like best second round candidates, just like go right past that one. Like it's just not interesting.
Here in Detroit, I read those best offensive line rankings. Just saying, I do like Chris's "just scout them yourself" philosophy.
Yeah, why do you need us?
Let's make that the slogan of the show, the Athletic Hockey Show Prospect Series. Just scout them yourself.
Hopefully people don't take that too far.
Yeah,
we are worried in the age of AI. When do we get the AI scouts kind of thing?
Yeah,
I do have like. Oh no, I have fascinating debates. I'll talk to NHL people who'd be like, "Oh, AI could never do my job." Your job is just figuring out whether a guy's a good skater or not, or whether he creates scoring chances. It's not that complicated. I feel like if you
so we've now alienated every single listener
could you
of
please
this podcast.
everybody edit the podcast? No,
This
don't
is what I do.
Keep it in there.
Have you read the comments in my articles? Everyone hates me, so just the more the merrier right now.
AI is definitely going to be doing my job. I'll tell you that much. That is going to.
I do. Just so you know, Corey, I do read the comments on all of your stories. I love it.
Lovely. The one today was probably lovely.
I thought they were actually pretty measured today, to be honest.
That's good to know.
But it's early. It's only 1 p.m. It's only 1 p.m.
All right. 7-round mock will be fun.
We're going off the rails. Let's wrap there. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Athletic Hockey Show Prospect Series. Remember, you can catch more of Chris over at FloHockey and on his podcast called Up, more of Scott and Corey on The Athletic, or, of course, you can just scout them yourself. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell to stay informed and catch new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And in the meantime, you can join our Discord community. We'll see you there.